What's up, ma? Big T sipping, ripping motherfucking dudes. We taking it way back today, boys. Shout out to the 2011 RMZ 03 server studs out there, okay? You know who you are, baby. Oh, man. I tell you what, bro. There was just something about those days from like the 2011 RF Supercross tracks up to like the 2014-15 Supercross tracks. Bro, that was like a whole vibe on MXM. That was a straight up whole Spency Boy vibe, bro. It was pretty next level. So, yeah, I'm so glad, like, when I think back to everything, even though I didn't really get into MXM until, like, later part of 2014, right around there, right? And then I didn't start pro racing until the middle of 2015 Supercross. The thing you got to remember about all that is, even though that's whenever I got into the game, you got to remember that in 2014 and 15 and even into 16, you know, your random online servers in the game, they were mainly playing like the 2011, 12, 13, and 14 Supercross tracks, right? That's pretty much what it was. Like, when I first got into the game, if you were to get on there and play any kind of, you know, random online multiplayer racing server type shit, you could either get on there and it would just play like the newest 2014 RF Supercross tracks, or you could get on the other server, which rotated between the 2011, 12, and 13 Supercross tracks. So that's literally where I learned to play MXM, was the 2011, 12, 13, and then you got into the 2014 Supercross tracks, right? And I just feel like it, once they started getting into that, where they started to take away the 2011, 12, and 13 Supercross tracks, you don't really see them much on the random online servers anymore. It's not really the same kind of thing anymore, because now you have the 15, 16, 17s, which are like a certain era before they started doing the Erode system. Then you have all the motherfucking, after 2017, where you try to get on there and you're on some weird-ass Supercross track that was made around the Erode system, and so you're trying to ride on there with like anywhere from 5 to 10 dudes on a random online server for like, 6 laps, and then it's hard to get the Erode level right where it's not building it too fast, but you can still feel it because you're on a track that has less pre-made, sandy-ass, loamy-ass traction. It's just a disaster for the random online servers. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing when you talk about the Erode system with the full gate of riders and you're running like, more than 6 or 7 laps. That's a whole different animal, because you can make the Erode, build itself really slowly, and therefore it's going to make itself a lot better. But when you try to get on there on those random online servers, ever since 2018, it's just not the same kind of animal anymore, man. It's a weird deal. You feel like you're riding on some sort of track that wasn't really made to ride on with, on a random online server. I don't know. Shit's weird. But what I'm trying to get at, though, is, boy, it was just a fun time. Like, I can even go back and ride on some of these 2014 Supercross tracks and still have some of the most fun that I've ever had in the game. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. That's pretty sad when it's like, I can go back and ride on some of these 2014 tracks that were not built strictly around the Erode system. They have proper dirt fillings, proper dirt decals, proper skill gap to the jump rhythms, proper whoop skill gap, all that kind of shit they started to lose whenever they started to build the tracks around the Erode system. Well, you can even go all the way back to 2014 Supercross tracks, and it still has all that shit. The pre-made ruts. Obviously, there's not a crazy amount of pre-made on all the tracks, but there still is some of the tracks with pre-made ruts. There's jump rhythm lines all over the place. There's big enough jumps. The traction feels pretty good on most of the 2014 tracks, even to this day, bro. Even to this day. Now, if you start going, older than 2014, like if you go back to 2013, 12, or 11, that's when you started to get into the ice skating rink, MX Simulator Supercross era, right? The traction back in those days on and I think it was super slick in 2011, then it got a little bit better in 2012, and then it even got a little bit better in 2013. Bro, this is how you know that you're a fucking old school MX Sim fan, is if you can literally tell the exact traction levels of all the years of the RF Supercross tracks. I'm telling you, boys, I got my stripes in this shit. You know what I'm saying? Fucking dude, man. Bro, shout out to Drake, bro. But anyways, okay, so yeah, but it was super slick ice skating rink back in 2011. Then it was 2012 was still an ice skating rink, but not quite as bad, right? And 2013 was still slick, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as 2012 and 2011. But I feel like 2014, that's when they really started to change the RF Supercross tracks. It's almost like you can segment it all off together. Like you can put 2011, 12, and 13 together. You can kind of put 2014, 15, and 16 together. I feel like 2017 is really the tippity top of the slope when it comes to skill gap and scaling and pre-made and jump rhythms and jump size and peak and whoop difficulty. I feel like 2017 was just the pinnacle of all that shit before they obviously went into caring more about the Erode system than the actual track designs. But, they have reaped the devastation of that, so I don't really have to say much more to that. But yeah, it's so crazy, man. I can still remember every single one of these 2014 Supercross tracks, down to a fucking corner, down to a micro terrain, it's just crazy. So many of these 2014 tracks were super memorable. I mean, that was just such a fun time in the game, man. And the crazy part about it is obviously you had the slower bike dynos like the 2011 RMZ, 2013 RMZ 450s back in those days. So I think that's why the slicker feeling feels a lot worse now than it did back then, because back then you didn't have as much, horsepower on the bikes and acceleration on the bikes. So if you go back in there and you ride a less power dyno back on the 2014 or even the 13 tracks and before, they don't feel as slick because your ass end is not sliding around all over the place because you're not going as fast, you're not accelerating as fast. So over time, it did kind of create some problems for those older tracks, but still, I mean, they're still fun. Even if you get on there on a brand new dyno bike in the game, like a 2018 or a 2016 dyno, and you go back and ride on the 2014 tracks, they're still a shitload of fun because what you can basically do is you can actually hit bigger rhythms than you would have hit back in those days. So it's almost like this whole system of relearning the tracks again and how fast can you go on the older tracks with the newer dynos, I'm telling you, this is like a whole fucking thing to this game, dude. Going back and riding on the older tracks, seeing what kind of massive rhythms you can hit. And I don't think it's to the point to where the bikes have gotten so much faster that it makes the older tracks to such a point of unrealistic that it's not even fun anymore. I don't think it's like that. I don't think the newer dynos have gotten so much faster that it makes all of the older RF Supercross tracks just obsolete. I don't really feel that way about it. I think it's bro, that shit's it's still just as fun as it's ever been, really. Especially when you consider the times changing and the tractions changing. Like, the 2014 tracks are still unbelievably fun to go ride on. And I still feel like the 2011, 12, and 13 tracks are the absolute best tracks in the game to learn the game on. That's what was so cool back in those days, was it was like, you know, you could ride on the 03 server and ride on all of those older Supercross tracks. Like, it would cycle between the 2011 series, 2012 series, 2013 series, and the jumps were a little bit smaller, the whoops were a little bit more rolled off. You could kind of learn how to ride on Supercross without getting on those new 2014 Supercross tracks that were kind of to that next level, right? So that was a really fun time in the game because everything was relevant. Every year of Supercross tracks were relevant. They were worth riding on. They were fun to ride on. And that didn't really change until you got to that 2018 and beyond years of RF Supercross tracks in the game. That's when all that shit changed. That's when the shitty 2019, 2020 RF outdoor tracks that barely had any fucking pre-made on them, nobody is going to go back and ride on those nowadays because they're boring. And that's the same way with a lot of the Supercross tracks they made in 2019 and 2020. It's like, what the fuck's the point in going back and riding on those? They're so made around a road that it's like, unless you're going to bring a crew of fucking 20 plus dudes to your server and you're going to run like a micro amount of a road with 20 laps or some shit, it's kind of pointless. It really is kind of pointless to ride on any of those tracks where they were just starting to do the Erode system and they were trying to figure out how they were going to make the tracks and the pre-made, and they were started to make everything smaller and easier, and the traction's been one of the biggest killers of any tracks after 2018. Because they started making it so much more loamy, so much more forgiving. When you would come up short on a jump, you don't pop off on those tracks anywhere near as much, because when you start making that traction softer and more loamy, and they did that because of the Erode system, they were trying to give the Erode system more of a cushiony feeling, but the problem is they did it to such a level that it killed all the skill gap on the tracks. It killed all of the pop off when you come up short. It killed all of the throttle control, because the more friction you give to the dirt, when you make it more loamy, then it just makes it to where everybody's wide open everywhere, hitting everything the exact same. But if you go back to like 2017 and previous tracks, and even all the way back to these 2014 tracks, you will start to realize, holy shit, there was so much more of a throttle control skill gap to these tracks back in these days. And if you go ride on like the 2019, 2020, 2021 Supercross tracks, even like Anaheim 1 2022 RF Pro Supercross track, that shit literally felt like a sand track. It literally felt like a sand track. And that's just not how the tracks felt like, even all the way back to 2014. Yeah, you can say the tracks before 2014 were a little bit slick feeling, but they weren't sandy feeling. They weren't loamy feeling. That is one of the biggest disasters, one of the biggest mistakes that RF has ever made to anything they've ever done, is this new age of more loamy, more friction, more sandy, more forgiving when you come up short. No throttle controls required anymore. See, it eliminates that entire, like, let's just say you have a straightaway to a triple jump, for instance, right? You come out of a corner, you got a straightaway to a triple jump, okay? Well, on pretty much any of those newer RF tracks after they started doing the Erode system, you literally just come out of the corner and you hold the gas wide open, and you're going to land the jump perfectly every time, because that's what it's made for, right? Whereas anything pre-2018, there's this extra level of, holy shit, I may over jump that jump, or I may come up short. Like it's more of an actual throttle control. There's more of a, see, when you add too much friction to the dirt, and when you make it feel too loamy or sandy, what you do is you limit the power of the bikes. That's what they've been doing with these modern RF tracks in the game, because they're doing everything for the Erode system, okay? What that does is it limits the power of the bikes. So then instead of you being able to go this fast on a track or pick up this much momentum on a track, well, pretty much all those newer RF tracks, when they have that much friction and loamy and sandy feeling to the tracks, now everybody's just wide open everywhere, and everybody's hitting every jump perfectly. They have eliminated so much of that shit, and I can't believe them dudes at RF couldn't realize that. They couldn't see that for some reason. I don't understand it, but like, you can still go back to these 2014 tracks, and I swear to God, some of these tracks have more skill gap and more separate yourself from a beginner player than 90% of those newer RF tracks that are built around a road. It is actually insane when you realize that. They have gone so far off the beaten trail when it comes to the actual feeling of the dirt, the traction on the tracks, because it doesn't just affect your traction, it also affects how easily it is to pop off the bike when you come up short or you overjump something. Even back in these 2014 days, even though the jump peaks were not super crazy, there was still a shitload of skill gap because the dirt didn't feel like sand. The dirt didn't feel like sand, RF. You know what I mean? So, you know, this was still back in the good old days where the dirt felt like dirt. You know, I would say the 2014, 15, 16, and 17 were the most feel like actual dirt years of Supercross tracks we've ever had in the games. And then after 2017, it's felt more like sand or more like loam, because they're making it around the Erode system. And pre-2014, it felt more like ice or slick, you know, dry hard pack or some shit like that than it did feel like normal dirt. But my point being is 2014 was the first year of Supercross tracks that really started to give you that better traction feeling, better skill gap on the jumps, way more difficult whoop sections. That's really where they started to ramp all that shit up. And 2017 Supercross tracks is just like 2014 tracks on steroids. That's all it really is. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just so sad to see how RF has just not considered any of those, like, progression from 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You know, that progression of skill gap, whoop difficulty, jump size, rhythm complexity, all these different aspects, asphalt specs to the Supercross tracks, right? It's just not the same anymore. It's just not the same anymore, bro. I don't know. I don't know what RF was thinking on all that, but it's pretty clear now that all RF could see was Erode, and a little bit more Erode.